Hello, students. We'll be working on Notes 14. This is solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So this is a third way that we can solve quadratic equations. So we have first worked on them by factoring. That's where you did your little chart with the multiply to AC and add to B. And then we did graphing in our last lesson where we looked for the x-intercepts and used the x's out of the x-intercepts. Some equations, it's either difficult to solve by factoring or not possible. And so there is a third method, and that third method is called using the quadratic equations. So, or excuse me, the quadratic formula. And so when you have an equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, like what we've been using, then this formula solved for x, so x equals, and then it's a big fraction, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, your denominator's 2a, that fraction will allow you to solve for the x's that would make this equation true. And so you need to have your equation equal to 0. You're going to identify the a, b, and c like we've been doing. Then this is all just going to be a substitution of your a, b, and c. So this looks intimidating, but actually you're just substituting numbers. And then we'll use a calculator to help us simplify that expression. So my directions are to solve. And when you get to a part where you're doing the square root, if it is not a perfect square, then we will round to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to work on this first problem where we have x squared minus 3x plus 2 equal to 0. So the equation is equal to 0 like it needs to be. We will look at a, which is 1, b is 2, and b is, negative 3, and c is 2. Now, I will have you use parentheses to help you do the formula. So one thing that helps is draw a long line for the fraction bar. The fraction has a lot of terms in it, and so you need to have this line long enough to take care of all that. Notice that the formula starts off with a negative, so put a negative and then a parentheses where we will substitute for the b. Then we'll have plus or minus. We've got this square root sign. Inside the square root, we'll be substituting for b, so I'm going to put parentheses with the square on the outside of the parentheses. Then subtract, there's a 4, and that'll be multiplied by whatever a is and whatever c is. And so see, as long as I drew that line for my fraction, it still wasn't long enough. So make sure your fraction bar is long enough. On the bottom, you have 2 times, and we'll substitute in for a. So this is what I like to have you set up for each problem, where you will substitute in for the a, the b, and the c. So the formula says b is your first substitution. B is negative 3. So notice that we have 2 negatives here. It's substituted in here again. Make sure you put the negative sign inside the parentheses. And then the next place that we substitute after the 4 is for the a, which is a 1, and the c, which is a 2. And then in your denominator, it's 2 times a, so this will go for the a, which is 1. So we need to go slowly. We're going to do one thing at a time. So your double negative is a positive 3, then the plus or minus, and we'll explain that in a little bit. Then draw your square root. Now, you don't have to draw it quite as long this time because we're going to use the calculator to work on this part of the quadratic formula. So I'm going to try to highlight that for you, if this will highlight. Not sure that it will. All right, it doesn't look like it. So I'll just have to have you pay attention. We are going to type into Desmos, not the square root sign, but everything exactly as it appears here that's underneath the square root sign. So in Desmos, I'm going to type in parentheses, -3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 2 with the parentheses just as I see them. So that's why I have you write it down on your paper. So you're going to type in parentheses, -3. You're going to close the parentheses. Now, to get a square, I'm going to close the keyboard. Your keyboard is right here. You'll bring that up. You have the third place over, it says a squared. So that's what gives you that exponent. Or you can do shift 6. All right, so it was -3 squared minus 4 times 1 times, and I forgot, I'm going to look again, times 2. So notice that I did not type in the square root, just what was underneath the square root, exactly as I saw it with the parentheses. So this is a 1. I'm going to go back to my notes, and I'm going to put that answer of 1 inside the square root. So that's what we just calculated. And then here's my fraction bar, the denominator 2 times 1, which gives me 2. All right, so this is x equals 3 plus or minus. Now, the square root of 1, you're thinking about what times what would give you 1. The square root of 1 is 1. So it's a perfect square. We do the square root. In this case, it was itself. And then remember to just keep your fraction. A lot of working with the quadratic formula is just rewriting the same thing over and over. All right, so I'm out of space down there, so I'm going to draw an arrow so you can see where I'm going to be working. So this plus or minus sign is now telling me that I have 2 answers that I'm going to get. So now I'm going to split up my 2 answers. For one of them, I'm going to use the plus sign, and for the other, I'm going to use the minus sign. So I'll say x equals, and then I'm going to do 3 and just use the plus sign and the 1 over 2. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that one. 3 plus the 1 would give me 4 on top and 2 on the bottom. And then x would equal 4 divided by 2, which is 2. It's going to be really important that you write as neatly as possible. So work down your page, not scattered all over the place, so that you can keep track of what you're doing. All right, now your other option is x equals, I'm going to go back to my problem, and instead of using the plus sign, I'm going to use the minus sign. So the top would be 3 minus 1. That's over 2. And so I'll continue to solve that. So 3 minus 1 is 2 on top, and then 2 on the bottom. And 2 divided by 2 is 1. So those are my, 2 solutions. And remember that we write the solutions in a solution set, so the order does not matter. 2 and 1 are the two solutions, and then we use those solutions to write the x-intercepts. If we were to graph this, we would have two x-intercepts. Remember, x-intercepts, that y value is a 0, and then the x value is from your solutions. So it would have, this equation would have x-intercepts. It would cross the x-axis at 2, 0 and at 1, 0. So those are our solutions. I might just show you that graph really quickly. You don't have to graph these, but just so you can tie this in, y equals x to the second minus 3x plus 2. Notice that the two solutions, one of them is 1, 0, or the two x-intercepts, 1, 0 and 2, 0, just like we found here. So your solutions are 2 and 1. All right, so this is what your work for the quadratic formula is going to be. Each problem should have this many lines. So in fact, you could even number the lines if you want to. I'll do that on the next problem. This would be line number 1, line number 2, line number 3, line number 4, line number 5, and line number 6. Each problem should have 6 lines of work. All right, so let's take a look at our next problem. Now, this one's actually going to have just a little bit extra at the beginning because this problem does not equal 0. And so the first thing that you're going to need to do is get the equation equal to 0. Let me scoot that box down just a little bit. So get the equation equal to 0. Now, to do that, you're going to need to move the 3 from the right side of the equal sign to the left side of the equal sign. So here's your equal sign. And so we're going to do the opposite of minus 3, which is to add 3. Now we're going to add 3 to both sides of the equal sign. But that 3 does not have an x on it. So it's not a like term with any of these. So we want to keep things in order. So first of all, we'll have 4x to the second. Then we'll keep the plus 8x in the middle. Then we'll have the plus 3, and then equals, and then negative 3 plus 3 after the equal sign there is 0. So get the equation equal to 0 first. You'll have a couple of problems where you'll have to do that, and I have that noted on your work page. So then your A is 4, B is 8, and C is 3. All right, so we talked about having 6 lines of work. So I'm going to number those lines as we go. Line number 1 would be the parentheses. So x equals, you want to draw the fraction bar and negative and put a parentheses where the b goes, plus or minus, draw your giant square root, a parentheses for b squared, minus 4, parentheses for the a and the c, and then in your denominator 2 with a parentheses for a. So we're going to substitute in according to the formula. So we already have the negative sign. Now our b goes on the inside. So that would be 8 and then b squared. So the 8 would go right here again. And then here we have a, which is the 4, and the c, which is the 3. And then in the denominator, the a, which is a 4. So that'd be line number 1. Line number 2, we work on getting rid of the parentheses. So the negative of 8 would be negative 8 plus or minus, then our square root. Okay, now we're going to stop here for just a second, go to the calculator. We're not going to type in the square root sign, but we are going to type in the 8 squared minus 4 times 4 times 3, using the parentheses like we showed. So parentheses 8 squared. Now this time I'll do shift 6 to get the squared. And then it was minus 4 times, and look back if you forget. So it was 4, and then 3. And so this tells us that we have 16. So we go back, and inside the square root, we now have 16. And then your denominator, we can multiply 2 times 4, and that gives us 8. All right, line 3. Every problem is going to have 6 lines of work. Line 3, you have x equals, all right, we have our fraction. We have negative 8 plus or minus. Now, your square root of 16. So what times what needs to be the same number. What number times itself would give you 16? That's going to be 4. And then your denominator is still an 8. So there's line 3. Line 4 is actually going to be a couple of things. So you'll have x equals, and we'll do negative 8 and just use the plus sign and the 4 over 8. Or your other option is x equals, here's your fraction, we'll have negative 8 and just use the minus sign and the 4 over 8. So notice that this is exactly like this, except one of them uses plus, the other uses minus. That's line 4. Line 5. Okay, on line 5, you add or subtract on top. So negative 8 plus 4, and if you need a calculator, use it. This would be negative 4. On the bottom, you have 8. Okay, and then here we have x equals. Now, this is negative 8 minus 4. Again, use a calculator if you need it. That's going to be negative 12 over 8. And then finally, line 6, this should give you your solution. You have x equals. Now, if you're not good with fractions, let me bring up Desmos so that you can see, what you can do with that. Just a second here. My eraser is not working like I want it to. Let me get back my 8. So on Desmos, I can actually type in my fraction. So negative 4, and then I can hit the divided by button, which is on the question mark key, divided by 8. Now, it will give me that as a decimal, but we do not want your answers as a decimal. So over here on the left, you have this circle with a fraction on it. That will change your answer to the reduced fraction. So the negative 4 over 8 will reduce to negative 1/2. And then you have your other one, x equals. And again, if you're not good at the fractions, use Desmos. So it's negative, and then on top you had 12 over 8. And because I told it to be a fraction, it gave me this answer. So negative 3 over 2. And that is your other answer of negative 3 over 2. So notice that sometimes you're going to get fraction answers. So these are the solutions. This would be negative 1/2 and negative 3/2. And those are x-intercepts. So remember that your x-intercepts have a y value of 0. And so one of the x-intercepts is negative 1/2, 0, and the other x-intercept is negative 3/2, 0. Okay, and then we'll go to our third example. And for this, we already have the equation equal to 0. So we can identify the a, b, and c. The a is 2, the b is negative 7, and the c is negative 3. So line number 1, we make our substitution, setting it up with the parentheses. So negative, put your parentheses, and then plus or minus inside your square root. You have parentheses with an exponent 2, and then minus 4, and 2 parentheses for the a and the c, over 2 times in parentheses here. So we can substitute in the a, b, and c. So it goes negative b. Now your b is already negative, so put that second negative in there, and then put your negative inside the parentheses right here. So negative 7 inside the parentheses squared, minus 4 times, all right, our a is a 2. Now our c is also negative, so make sure you put a negative in with the 3. And then on the bottom, it's 2 times a. The a is a 2. There's step 1. Line number 2, we have x equals, make our fraction. The double negative gives us a positive 7, plus or minus. We have our square root, but now we're going to go to the calculator and type in what is underneath the square root. So that would be parentheses, negative 7. You must have these parentheses. Shift and 6 will square it, and then it's minus 4. And I'm going to look again, times 2 times negative 3. So a parentheses for the 2 and a parentheses for the negative 3. Now this time it tells me that my answer is 73. So inside my square root, I'll have 73. Then my denominator is a 4. There's line 2. Line 3. Notice every time I'm doing x equals. So x equals 7 plus or minus. All right, now 73 is not a perfect square. So we're going to have to do the square root on the calculator. This is one of those where in the instructions, I said if it's not a perfect square, you're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So that's what we'll be doing. So now the square root is on your keyboard. Here's your square root button. And we're going to do 73 inside the square root. Now notice it gets you lots of decimals. We're going to go to the nearest hundredth. So find your decimal sign, then go 2 more, and then you're going to look at the 1 right after it. If it's under 5, we do not round up. So we'll keep this at 8.54. So 8.54 is our decimal that we'll be using for the square root of 73. So 8.54, and then this is over are 4. So there's line 3. Line 4 will have x equals. So we'll split it up now, 7, and we'll just use the plus sign, 8.54, and the bottom's going to be a 4. Or we'll have x equals our fraction, and then we could use the minus sign. So 7 minus 8.54, and this is over 4. All right, so there's line 4. Line 5. So for line 5, we'll work on those numerators. So x equals, now, if you need a calculator, just go ahead. So 7 plus 8.54 is 15.54. So that's easy to do. Just use a calculator as much as you need it. So 15.54, and the bottom is a 4. Here you have x equals, and then if you need to do the subtraction, you can go to Desmos and just do 7 minus 8.54. It says that it's negative 1.54. So we'll write that in the numerator, negative 1.54, and the bottom is a 4. And then this is a decimal that we're approximating, so it won't be a fraction. So we're going to do this division and get our decimal answer. So this is going to be x equals, okay, I have to take 15.54 and divide it by 4. So 15.54, hit the divided by key, divide it by 4. Now, this one, it says that we get 3.885. To round to the nearest hundredth, so I'm going to go to this second 8. I'm going to look one after it. That is a 5, which means I take this last 8 up to a 9. So we're actually going to use 3.89 as our decimal approximation. So 3.89. Erase that. So 3.89. And then we'll have our other one, x equals. Remember that this is a negative. So I'm going to divide negative. Now see here, you might just want to edit this one. So negative 1.54. And I'm dividing it by 4. And I get negative 0.385. So once again, I go to this 8. The number after it is 5 or bigger, so I want to take this up to a 9. So negative 0.39. And that will be my other solution. So negative 0.39. And then I'm ready to write my solutions. So the order does not matter, 3.89 and negative 0.39. And now these are decimal approximations, but we can still write those as your x-intercepts. So something 0 and something 0. So we'll have the 3.89, and we'll have the negative 0.39. And I thought that this one, since those are decimal answers, I might show you that that really does happen before we end up. So if I take the original problem, 2x squared minus 7x minus 3, and type that into Desmos, y equals 2x to the second minus 7x minus 3, then let's look for those x-intercepts. There's one of them. And so the 6 would round the 8 up. There's your negative 0.39. And here's your other one, 3.8. And this would round up to 9. So 3.89. So we get those x-intercepts, which are approximations of the solutions. So the only time you're going to use decimals is if your square root is not a perfect square. Your first 4 problems on your homework, the square root is a perfect square. So the first 4 problems, no decimals. Only the last 2 will be decimals. So you've got 6 problems total. The first 4, either write them as whole numbers or integers or fractions. Only the last 2 do you do decimals and you round to the nearest hundredth. All right, good luck on your homework and continue to ask questions whenever you have them.